Blinking your eyes open. Hello, everybody. Good to see all of you. Happy Sunday. Right in the heart of the summer we are. And I was talking to somebody today who was kind of describing a person in their life who is living beyond their means, right? A person who is making a particular income, but yet living as if they make more of an income, and how that's creating a lot of distress in that person's life. And this is kind of the American way, and if it's not even the American way, I think it's like kind of the modern way, right? It goes along with that whole notion of fake it till you make it, right? You're going to drive a car that you can't necessarily afford. You might rent an apartment or your house that you can't necessarily afford. You're going to put a lot of stuff on credit, right? And you're just constantly trying to like keep up with it. And then you realize, oh my God, well, I want this too, and I want this too. And, you know, other people are doing this. And so you're constantly kind of pulling in and drawing from outside of yourself and trying to fill that void. And that's kind of like the American way. And if it's not even just the American way, it's the modern way. And I think this goes to contribute to how much dissatisfaction, anxiety, depression, and so on and so forth that is experienced in modern life. And this all comes from this belief that we can find salvation outside of ourselves, right? If I just got that boat, oh, that would make the summers great. I really can't afford it, but it would just be so great, and I think it would bring the family closer together, and I'm just going to get that boat. And then you get the boat, and then there's problems with the boat, right? I mean, like there's all of that goes on, and it's just different person, different story, but kind of the same set of circumstances. And I've had my own version of that, right? Bags and shoes and, you know, whatever. And when I used to work in the legal field, I made a heck of a lot more money than I made now, but I never had as much money available to me, which was strange because I was literally pissing my money away on things that didn't make a difference in my life. But I had this compulsion, right? And when we have empty holes, right, when we lack fulfillment on a deeper, deeper, deeper level, we will constantly try and fill those voids until hopefully eventually we come to understand what really is fulfilling, right? What is really impactful and fulfilling in our lives. And I think for those of us who've been working with a spiritual practice, not necessarily a religious practice, but a spiritual practice, one that taps you in to your inner being, is a spiritual practice. When we have an impactful spiritual practice, we are less apt to fill that void with emptiness, because there isn't much of a void there. We feel fulfilled from the inside, radiating outward, right? And it's not an immediate thing, right? Oftentimes when we pick up a spiritual practice, many times for many of us, it's because we've reached rock bottom. We've reached this point where nothing works. We've reached a point of desperation that we'll try anything, right? It's usually the last thing that we try that's like, oh my God, I could have saved myself so much time and misery if I just started with a spiritual practice, right? And when we are not fulfilled from within, we tend to live beyond our means, right? We tend to overconsume. We tend to seek validation of ourselves by way of our external form, right? We seek external validation from others. There's not an internal validation or empowerment. And we tend to just create a whole bunch of chaos and drama in our lives that otherwise could be completely circumvented if we decided to really turn inward and examine our patterns, examine the choices we've been making, examine how we are accountable for our own circumstances. And that's really what spiritual practice is. It's about taking accountability and having responsibility for oneself, one's happiness, creating boundaries, creating structure around a spiritual practice. And sometimes you don't want to do it, right? And sometimes you don't. And that's exactly what you needed. Sometimes you don't want to do it and you still do it anyway, because that's exactly what you need too. And it's that level of discernment of your relationship with your ego. Spiritual practice helps us identify ourselves our inner selves, our deep inner selves, as being separate and differentiated from the ego. When we don't have that ability to look inward and separate the true self from the ego, then the ego's running the whole show. And then we are at the whims of our desire systems and our resistances. An impactful spiritual practice fills us up with what is already within us, right? It's always waiting here for us. It's, are we willing to turn in and take a look at that part of ourselves? Or are we still seeking outside of ourselves? When we start to turn in and cultivate what's that seed that's already within us, we begin to acknowledge it. We begin to feel fulfilled from within. And then we realize that we don't need as much from the external world to fluff us up, right? We become much more minimalistic. We become much more discerning on what we bring in, and the people that we bring in, right? The choices we make, the circumstances we cultivate, because there's just a heightened level of awareness. And this, not only the physical body, but that consciousness that resides within it, which is the diamond, we become very protective. We become a steward of that. And then our lives start to really change. They start to change form. They start to change substance. So do our relationships. And I hope you guys have been able to find that, not only if you've been on many journeys with me or practicing yoga or meditation or other practices that you do that are, maybe not necessarily here in this community, but any and all work that you do. Even this 40-day journey, right, can help you tap in more deeply into nurturing that source of resource within us. And as that blossom and fulfills, we seek less outside of ourselves. And that's what we call sovereignty, spiritual sovereignty. All right, let's start with our Sufi circles tonight. Let's warm up the spine. We have a nice meditation. And I got